So the topic for last session of today's panel discussion is 10-year-old child noticed to have yellow eyes. So a 10-year-old child, male child, first child of non-consanguineous marriage, presented with complaints of on and off yellowish discoloration of eyes since 10 months. There was past history of mild intermittent pain in abdomen and anorexia 5 months ago. There was no history of weight loss, no history of blood or blood product transfusion anytime in the past, and there was no history of prolonged intake of any medication. The child was born by normal vaginal delivery with a birth weight of 3 kgs, and there was no history of antenatal or perinatal complications and no record of neonatal jaundice. No other family members had complaints of similar nature in family. On physical examination, the child was ecteric but had no pallor. The vitals were normal. There were no peripheral signs or stigmata of chronic liver disease and no dysmorphic faces. Anthropometrically, the child had normal height and weight for his age and sex, and the developmental history was normal. On clinical examination, the child had soft and non-tender liver which was palpable just 1 centimeter below the right costal margin with a span of 9 centimeter. There was no associated splenomegaly, no ascites, and rest of the systemic examination was within normal limit. So then the child brought back some of the reports. Back in 2017, the child was investigated for similar complaints. Of note, particularly one incident on 13th of August 2017 had a significant jaundice with 9.3 milligram of total bilirubin, 5.8 of direct fraction, and 840 of SGPT with ALP of 181. GGT and INR was not done, but the reports again were on the declining trend when the child had similar episode after a couple of months on 25th of November 2017.
Okay, can you just wait here now? So can I ask, okay, quick question to the audience and we'll go to the panel. Just looking at the reports, whatever we have, and these were some of the reports, as you can see, all LFTs were not done at all periods of time, which is quite common when a child comes to you. What do you think about these reports? These are the ones that we had. Okay, let me go to my panel. Dr. Ganpati, would you like to just what do you think?
Yeah, so
what is going on?
The child has been thriving well,
yeah,
but there has been definitely recurrent jaundice. The only thing which I was tickled right in the beginning is when you have this intermittent abdominal pain, we do use a lot of these preparations like nitazoxanide, and they do cause discoloration of the eye. So if I didn't have the report at that time, I would have checked through the medications that was given to this child.
Okay. Anything more about the jaundice? For example, I make it quick. So when we really asked and went into more depth about this so-called off and on jaundice, it is more that we felt from the history that it was always there, but it seemed to go up and down. When you really started teasing, so that's the sort of history, but you can take it a little bit with a pinch of salt.
If I didn't have the bilirubin total and direct, I would have asked whether any fever or any infectious thing is making it go up. Like I would be thinking more on lines of Gilbert's or Dubin-Johnson kind of a thing if it's been going along, and otherwise the child has been doing very well.
Right.
So I would have tried to look at urine color and the precipitants, whether it was febrile, fasting, or anything of that
Specific at any time, 3 time points we have here. At any one of the time points, you would like to ask a little bit more questions?
Yeah, because this middle time when you have an SGPT of 840 is not what is fitting with those conjugate inherited hyperbilirubinemia syndromes. Rest all might go away, but this 840 is something which is pointing towards something else.
Yeah, so the first and third
could have
more
gone.
or less the same.
Yeah.
Bilirubin levels with normal transaminases, but the second one is a little, and okay, we'll come to that in later. Aditya, next. Next.
So the child was then worked up at KEM hospital. As we can see on complete blood count, the child had 11.2 Hb with normal TLC and platelet count, and the peripheral smear was normocytic normochromic with no evidence of hemolysis. The reticulocyte count was 1.1%, which was again normal, and the bilirubin was marginally increased to 4.8 milligram percent with a direct fraction of 3.2. Rest all other LFTs including SGOT, SGPT, GGT and INR were within normal limits.
So these reports were very similar to the first and the third visit reports that had already come back. Again, isolated, conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, nothing else along with that. Do you want anything else along with this? Any other tests?
No fever, no pain?
At this time, no. They were referred to us only for the child was yellow.
I would like to have an ultrasound at least to
Okay.
make sure that there
Okay,
not anything.
next, can we just have a look at that?
The ultrasound scan of abdomen revealed
It was
evidence
normal.
of mild hepatomegaly with a smooth organoid line, and even the Doppler was normal.
Anything else?
Since I'm likely to ascribe that SGPT of 840 maybe to a episode of acute viral hepatitis, that's the best I can think of right now. So as was discussed in the previous case, I would be happy doing an HbSAg to make sure that yes, he's not carrying it. That's it. And I will just follow,
You would like an HbSAg?
just to make sure that that episode of 840 SGPT was not related to acute hepatitis B. It has nothing to do with this
Okay,
diagnosis.
next slide.
So in summary, we have here a case of isolated hyperbilirubinemia in an adolescent male, which is of conjugated nature with normal transaminases and normal synthetic functions of liver. There are no obvious abnormalities on USG, and there is absence of other telltale signs of chronic liver disease.
Okay, next. For want of time, next.
So,
So before you go to the next, coming back to the audience, we have been talking about liver disease the whole day. So most of the liver disease fits into acute, chronic, acute on chronic. Is any of this a possibility here? No. So what are you thinking of before asking for a genetic study? Are you thinking? So this is a chronic liver disease. Okay. So you want to work up for a chronic liver disease. Anything to suggest chronicity as a chronic liver disease? So next come to the next slide.
First we have to,
So these are the ones we talked about in the morning, right? For chronic liver disease. Do you think these tests are indicated in this child? So he said you wait and watch, but I mean this child's history is for 10 months. So we have, even though we have not waited and watched, we have
So
definitely
first-
watched.
No, except for that one episode where we had an SGPT which was on the higher side, it fits into an inherited one of those Dubin-Johnson varieties,
Right.
which has different phenotypes from
Right.
one extreme to another.
Right.
And if I didn't have the bilirubin reports and I had not asked about the color of the urine, it could
Right.
still be Gilbert's with fasting or
Right.
any form of stress, which is
Right.
pretty common, up to a bilirubin of 5.
just a comment that we are going acute and acute on chronic. First question we have to ask whether there is a disease
Correct,
in
that's
this
exactly.
child. So first whether it is a disease or not. So
Right.
from all this child is doing well. So apart from that yellowness,
Right.
and if we are directly going on to genetic testing and there are polymorphism, etc. First we have to communicate with the patient whether there is disease or not for which we are going to test. So whether disease is
Right.
there.
I'm just looking at our thinking mechanisms. When this child is jaundiced, and you can imagine from the parents' point of view, from the surrounding point of view, from school point of view, the child is sort of kept away. This child has got jaundice, stay away. So it's very difficult to counsel them unless you come to the diagnosis. Now we are talking of, we can come to the diagnosis by various tests. These are the tests we have been hearing since morning. So I was asking, is this, anyone feel this is indicated in this particular child? More likely, yes, but would you like to do it? So you are not thinking of chronic liver disease at this stage, but you still want to definitely find out what is the underlying etiology. What is it that
The
you...
only thing is that recurrent abdominal pain
Right,
that was mentioned in the beginning.
Right.
If this was, the ultrasound should have been extended to the rest of the abdomen.
Right.
And if I had a good ultrasonologist who would have assessed my right iliac fossa, I got any evidence of an inflammatory bowel disease setting in, any family history of
we have a
autoimmunity.
good ultrasonologist at KEM.
Yeah, so
Nothing.
then I would have jumped into an AIH with that direct
Nothing.
bilirubin. Otherwise, I wouldn't have, just like
Great.
Yogesh said, I wouldn't venture into anything.
So she said that one episode where the ALT was high, the second visit, she ascribes to the possibility of it being acute viral hepatitis. Any other possibilities? How- We're not waiting and watching. We are still, investigations are not over. We are deciding what is the correct next investigation.
Since the duration has been for more than 6 months, and there is definitely not only isolated hyperbilirubinemia, at one point we also had raised transaminase,
Mhm.
so it seems to be a fluctuating force, and it would definitely fits into CLD and autoimmune hepatitis.
So-
These work has to be minimum done.
Which CLD,
So Wilson's
Which-
and autoimmune.
so Wilson's and autoimmune hepatitis will behave with a conjugated jaundice in the range of 3 or 4 for 10 months with only once the ALT has gone up?
No.
I doubt.
If we do genetic studies, we would get Wilson's mutation also.
Yeah, but we don't want to just, I mean, there may be some simpler tests to do. Would you like to do a liver biopsy? Next slide. Next slide. So that's previous. So would you like to do a liver biopsy or not?
If
Patient-
you're strongly,
Sorry, let's
if
go
you're
back to the
strongly thinking of Dubin-Johnson, which I would in this scenario, then liver biopsy may be a way to confirm that diagnosis, because you'll see that pigment and that would confirm and that would exclude any chronic hepatitis, fibrosis, cirrhosis. But some people may not agree because it's an invasive test. But otherwise, if I am the person and the parent is willing, I would go ahead and do a biopsy.
So the question is whether you want to do a liver biopsy. It depends. Genetics. Genetics will not necessarily, and we'll come to the genetics a little later, but if you are worried about something that,
First thing is these things before we even think of biopsy. I think these have to be minimum investigation done for autoimmune and Wilson's. I mean, irrespective of the profile.
But Lalit is not.
let us discuss it a little bit more, and I don't want to take too much. But why not do a liver biopsy? Why not? Because if you're thinking that there is a chronicity going on, your biopsy will also tell you. And if there is a differential of some other conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you could also get a diagnosis. So maybe that biopsy, though it's invasive, can help you both ways.
I think biopsy will come, but definitely not before this simpler test. I think this is what I think.
Any other opinion?
I think giving a high dose of niacin will increase the bilirubin in the...
No, not for dominant. Right. So, okay, let's come to the next. So, anyway, we believed in biopsy. We did the biopsy and biopsy picture because we thought that it could, our differential at that time was that it's possibly of one of the two conjugated hyperbilirubinemias which are seen, and you would expect to see something.
Liver biopsy was suggestive of enlarged hepatocytes with coarse brown pigment deposition in the central lobular location, which was positively staining for hepatocytes with melanin, resulting in a black precipitate, and negative for Pearl's Prussian blue, indicating there was absence of hepatic iron overload.
Okay, next slide. No. So these are the, I'm going a little fast. So these are the two tests which may help you in making a diagnosis, or more than that, differentiating between Dubin-Johnson and Rotter's. But I don't know of any place that does the corpopreference. Anyone knows, you'll be happy to do that. Second is you may be able to do a HIDA scan, but that sometimes we have found, at least our experience has been, is sometimes non-contributory. And that's the reason we decided to go ahead for an invasive test rather than doing one of these two. Next slide. Okay, now coming back to the genetics. Would you like to tell us if we were suspecting?
So that is what I was trying to tell, that whenever we tell patient that we have diagnosed clinically as Dubin-Johnson or Rotter or in unconjugated Gilbert, and patient says that apart from jaundice there is nothing, so whether there is a disease and whether I need any treatment or whether it is going to be lifelong. So in such cases there is no treatment. So, and there is nothing is going to happen after the diagnosis. So that is why first we have to discuss with the patient the role of liver biopsy and the genetic testing, and whether it is needed or not. That is the first thing. Whether it is really fitting into diagnosis or only patient wants to know why the jaundice is there, because we are seeing more genetic testing. Gilbert patient, adult patients are coming for prenatal diagnosis. They want to terminate the baby unnecessarily. So there are a lot of complications happening with genetic testing. So in such cases like Dubin-Johnson, then Rotter and Gilbert syndrome, where you have a benign condition, there is no liver disease as such, and you have only jaundice as a presentation. Sometimes drug needs to be kept in mind. Then first we have to discuss whether patient should opt for liver biopsy versus genetic testing. If clinically you are sure that it is Dubin-Johnson Rotter, direct genetic testing also without liver biopsy, because it is invasive, right? Invasive because you're not going to do any treatment and not a bad prognosis, good prognosis. So better you can avoid invasive procedure. And in cases where you are really want to do genetic testing, so genetic testing for what? Once you have diagnosed Dubin-Johnson or liver biopsy, whether you want to really do genetic testing. So in that case, you have to discuss why the genetic testing is needed in this child, especially 10 years old.
No, that's fine, but
So after all this discussion, then if liver biopsy is confirmed, the genetic testing may or may not be, later.
yeah, that's fine. But we still need to get a confirmed diagnosis. Though clinically you may strongly suspect that this is Dubin-Johnson, you require it either on the biopsy or you require it on genetic testing.
Any of them.
Because otherwise, clinically, we cannot differentiate Dubin-Johnson from rotors.
Yeah.
And if you had got a liver biopsy that was normal, we would have still thought this could be rotors, but are we missing something else? Parents would want a confirmed diagnosis, and most parents today now want a confirmed diagnosis so that they don't have to worry for the rest of their lives what this
So
child
that's
has
what
got.
the aim of testing, that if they want to really differentiate Dubin-Johnson's versus rotor, then genetic testing,
Yeah.
because we unnecessarily end up in getting information when you won't
Right.
get any
Okay.
mutation or variant.
Okay, but I think a naming ceremony is a must, even if it is Gilbert, because there are so many interactions, drug interactions, anesthetic complications. You need to know what it is.
Right.
It's very essential.
And one thing more means definitely I would use this as an opportunity to complete the vaccination for hepatitis A and B if he has not been. Because
Okay.
any other episode and then further raised transaminases
Okay.
would cause problems.
So we are going to go quickly, as I mentioned, that Dubin-Johnson is a benign disorder. There are no problems, no treatment. You don't require a treatment. They live a full normal life, whether it's Dubin-Johnson or rotors. But there are a few things you need to remember. That though it is a benign disorder, it can have a neonatal onset. There is a variant of that. They can present with hepatosplenomegaly, which sometimes makes the diagnosis a little bit more confusing, because then it's a little bit more difficult just based on the clinical history to say that this is Dubin-Johnson. They can be associated with symptoms. Quite a few of them, in fact, have minor abdominal pain, little bit of nausea, and even vomiting. Some feel that this is psychosomatic because they have got jaundice and because they're going to the doctors, they're getting this, but it has been well known to be associated with that. It can be associated with other disorders like Gilbert's, etc. So sometimes there can be a little bit of confusion. And there is a variant in which can have associated factor 7 deficiency, and you may in fact have a prolonged prothrombin time, again making the diagnosis a little bit confusion. We still feel the second episode where the child had a high SGPT, SGPT is quite likely a viral hepatitis. If you were to do a biopsy of the child of Dubin-Johnson with superadded viral hepatitis, what will you find? This is for the hepatologist. Pigments disappear. Please remember, well documented that a child with Dubin-Johnson, when has an acute hepatitis injury, during that episode of hepatitis, if you actually do the biopsy, you will find no pigment, we don't know, and they come back after 2 or 3 months again, right? And this has happened once to us and it has bitten us, so we realize that. So we have to be careful that we know that particular thing.
Some of them have polylithiasis also, so they present later.
Some of them have.
Yes, they go for cholecystectomy, and then it becomes a
Correct.
confusion.
And some of the investigations, please note, especially if they come from a peripheral area, when the pathologist there sees a bilirubin level of 4 and 5, and though his lab may have SGPT, SGOT of 70, 40, 30, he is a little scared in giving a normal, because they always think jaundice is associated with raised SGPT, SGOT, and we have seen that. So the lab will, before to send it back to the local doctor, they will give a report of SGPT, SGOT that is on the higher side, because the doctor there will say jaundice hai lekin ye kaise normal hai. And this is very common, not from the regular labs, but from the labs. If you get reports from there and you have an SGPT, please do not always depend on that as the truth.
Yeah, but do you get sludging?
Sorry?
Do you get sludging in the gallbladder which could be causing symptoms?
No, you don't get sludging in the, you don't get cholecystitis.
And what about
you don't get
dyskinesia
cholecystitis.
of the gallbladder which is
No,
mentioned?
No.
One more point. Sometimes you pick them up when they have had a type of acute viral hepatitis. You don't know they have Dubin-Johnson's, but the bilirubin after that does not come down. We also see it with Gilbert's. The bilirubin is remaining high after acute viral hepatitis, but everything else is normalized. One should think of one of these areas.
We call this the hyperbilirubinemia syndrome. The keeps goes higher than usual.
If you remember at the last meeting, we presented a case of Wilson's disease with Dubin-Johnson, and that caused tremendous confusion because, anyway, that's a different case altogether.
We
Yeah.
used to do the PSP test long back.
Right, but that's no longer
Now,
recommended.
On CMC, we used to have the double hump
Yeah.
and all that and all
That's
that.
no
Now,
longer, yeah. So can I ask you, when you send it for Dubin-Johnson, will you 100% be able to tell us the diagnosis that is there or not? I'm suspecting Dubin-Johnson or rotors. I'm sending it to a genesis. I want a confirmed diagnosis.
No,
If
still-
it is positive, yes.
If you're specifically sending for Dubin-Johnson or rotor, then most of the cases, barring 5% where you don't know the mutations, and if you send a specific genes, not exome or genome in such cases, then you will definitely pick up a mutation.
So a negative report, will it rule out a Dubin-Johnson or Rotor? No. Still at the end of the time, I have to tell my parents ki it's negative, but you may still be having it. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. It is possible.
Okay. So remember, there are
So that is why
no test is 100%.
That is why I told you before that you have to discuss that
Take your
first.
point.
That
Okay,
if
last couple of slides. I think.
We have cases of Bipolar syndrome where enzymes are deranged.
Hey, that's after, post. This case is not Crigler-Najjar.
So Dubin-Johnson syndrome is an autosomal recessive disorder which is caused by impaired canalicular export of conjugated bilirubin. The predominant protein which is affected is multidrug resistant protein MRP2, which is encoded by ABCC2 gene on the 10th chromosome. Clinically, it is difficult to differentiate from Rotor syndrome, which is caused by defective gene SLCO1B1, and which occurs due to defective bilirubin reuptake due to deficiency of another membrane protein.
So, yeah, so just this is the last slide.
So this is the algorithmic approach to a case of hyperbilirubinemia based on whether the bilirubin is predominantly conjugated or unconjugated. If it's conjugated, then depending on the urinary coproporphyrin levels and the isomer 1:3 ratios, we can differentiate the two syndromes into Rotor and Dubin-Johnson syndrome. While in unconjugated bilirubinemia, depending on whether the child is having any symptoms in the form of hemolysis or peripheral smear, we can decide whether it's a hemolytic disorder or non-hemolytic. And depending on the level of bilirubin in the blood, we can differentiate the diseases into broadly two categories, which one is Gilbert syndrome and second one is Crigler-Najjar type 1 and 2.
So basically, two types, conjugated, unconjugated, conjugated, Rotor's Dubin-Johnson, unconjugated, Crigler-Najjar type 1, 2, and Gilbert's, which was already been discussed. I think it's time.
Gilbert, it is more specific and easier testing and 100% diagnosis. So genetic is the way. But if you say Dubin-Johnson, Rotor, then a little be careful before discuss with the patient and then.
Okay, thank the panel and thank everyone. Yes.
Should we do in Dubin-Johnson a liver biopsy for demonstration of treatment, or we should go for the genetic?
Direct genetic test.
And in how many patients of Dubin-Johnson you find gene testing is positive?
That's what you said, 90%.
Most of the liver disorders, liver biopsy is going out now because we are having biochemistry and clinical good correlation apart from few glycogen storage disorders. So most of them, you can directly go for genetic testing.
We respect all gene labs. But we respect, but
So I'm not a laboratory person, but clinically, most of the liver disorders now can be diagnosed genetically.
I think what we need to do is, I think hepatologists, the biochemical lab, all the lab and the genetics, we will always need to work together to come to the diagnosis.
Thank you.